The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. We would like to hand over to counsels for Mrs. Ieng Thirith to put questions to the experts if they would wish to do so. And counsels for Mrs. Ieng Thirith is allotted 30 minutes to put these questions. Counsel Pat Po Sieng. Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors, and good afternoon to everyone in this courtroom and to the experts. We thank you very much indeed for your time here before us to clarify on your reports with regard to the fitness to stand trial of Mrs. Ieng Thirith, who is our client. I have a few questions to put to the experts. The first question is concerning the scores. Dr. Chaktida gave to Ieng Thirith. She scored 24 out of 30. However, in your reports, the joint reports, you indicated already that you scored lower gradually, starting from 18 to currently 14 points. There is a huge discrepancies concerning these findings. My question is, what is your opinion concerning the way Dr. Chaktida gave the scores to Madame Ieng Thirith, whether it was part of the standardized scoring system or not?
No, the scoring system and the questions that Chaktida used were, as I've already explained, incorrect. If you rescore her own test using the correct criteria, you get a score of 15, which is not completely different to the scores that we have presented over the last 2 years, which have, as you said, last year ranged from 15 to 18, and this year they've ranged from around 11 to 14. So the scores used by Professor Tida cannot be used because they were incorrectly administered. If you rescore them using guidelines, the standardized guidelines, we estimated a score of 15, and our own scoring done on 2 separate days, we this week could not score her above 12, and as I've indicated previously, the mental health staff in the detention centre who know Mrs. Thirith very well, and they scored it between 11 and 14 when they administered the test between May and August this year.
Counsel, thank you very much, Professor, for your response. I have another question to you. Last year, perhaps by late of last year, you issued the report concerning the health status of Mrs. Ieng Thirith. And recently, after 6 months of treatment, According to the order by the Supreme Court Chamber, the trial chamber orders Ieng Thirith to be treated for a period of 6 months. And after this, you also had met Ieng Thirith on 2 occasions, or for 2 days, if I'm not wrong. It was on the 26th and 27th, and on the 29th of August, a report was filed. May I know about your impression concerning, or your findings concerning the changes in her physical and mental fitness?
Can I clarify? Are you asking about her fitness to stand trial, to plead and stand trial, or are you talking about her overall cognitive abilities?
Counsel, my question was about her indeed cognitive ability. We would like to know whether her cognitive ability has improved or not, because before you already indicated that her cognitive ability was impaired, and then she could not consult with her counsels for pleading. So we would like to know whether this situation remains the same or improved.
It has not improved. In our opinion, her cognitive abilities have deteriorated over the last few months, and therefore there's been no change in our opinion as to the issues relating to her ability to instruct counsel.
Counsel, thank you very much, Professor. I have another question which is more technical in nature. Dr. Choktida stated in her testimony that Mrs. Ieng Thirith could read the newspapers in a foreign languages accurately. We would like to know how she could assess someone to have the ability to read the newspaper accurately, and that the person was not experience any symptom of dementia.
That's very difficult because you're asking us to comment on Dr. Choktida's findings that she said. We have no idea how she actually tested that. Our indication from those looking after her was that she was not taking in what she was reading.
Counsel, thank you. I also wish to refer to Dr. Choktida, who testified before the chamber that on one occasion she met with Mrs. Ieng Thirith, and she saw her reading news article. Dr. Choktida did not remember the heading of that newspaper article, but she remembered that Mrs. Ieng Thirith was reading in French, and Dr. Choktida could read French, who at the same time could judge Ieng Thirith's reading of French to be accurate. So my question is that if someone who could read a newspaper article accurately, was she or he free from having dementing illness when reading that?
No, people with dementia can still read. It's a question as to how much they actually retain and how much understanding they have of what they're actually reading. Given that we do not know what Dr. Chaktida was actually questioning her about, it's difficult to comment on whether or not she was able to understand. I think it is most unlikely that she was.
Council, thank you. I refer to your report, paragraph 59, and on the second sentence, you indicated that I do not know whether it was not properly translated, but on the second sentence, you said that we recommend that Mrs. Ieng Thirith's other medical treatment continue, and that they be monitored as and when deemed appropriate according to her medical team. I just feel not sure whether the translation is correct from the English version or not, because you said that there would be no other alternative or approach to improve her cognitive abilities. But here in this paragraph, you said you recommend that Mrs. Ieng Thirith's the medical treatments continue. So could you please help elaborate on this?
Ms. Ieng Thirith is on a number of other medications for cardiac disease and also for gastrointestinal problems. She's not currently on any psychotropic medications at all. The tablets that the treatment she is receiving for the dementia, the rivastigmine, we've already commented on. What we're saying there, and this is in the absence of a physical re-examination, is that the medications that she is on are not affecting her cognitive function at all, and their continuation should be dependent on the underlying medical conditions which they are being used to treat.
Council, thank you. I have my final question, please. After examining Mrs. Ieng Thirith by the team of experts, may I know your final conclusion on her mental and physical fitness currently?
We came to the unanimous view that Mrs. Thirith suffers from, Mrs. Ieng Thirith suffers from a moderate to severe dementia, that she has no acute physical health problems to our knowledge, and that, as we've stated, we do not believe there's any other treatments that are available to improve her cognitive functioning.
Council, I thank you very much, professors. I have no further questions, but at the same time, I wish to cede the floor to my colleague to continue with some more questions. Thank you, Mr. President, and Your Honors.
in coming to the conclusion that you reached, that Ieng Thirith is suffering from a moderate to severe dementia, we see from your report at paragraph 60 that you looked at the diagnostic guidelines laid out by the International Classification of Diseases at the 10th edition. They are they not, standardized guidelines produced by the World Health Organization to assist in determining dementia and the stage it has reached? Is that correct?
Yes, they are a standardized way used internationally to come to diagnoses, and they also allow for staging of diagnoses, and they specifically allow for some staging of dementia.
And are they guidelines that have developed over many years in order to assist with an accurate diagnosis of the stage dementia has reached?
Yes, they have been developed, I think, from the 1960s onwards by consensus panels of experts who weigh up all the available evidence at the time and then come together to examine what is the best way to standardize diagnoses.
And there are 4 guidelines. The first is that of a loss of memory, and you characterized, on the basis of what you learned about Ieng Thirith, that she had a severe memory decline on the basis of an inability to retain new information and only fragments of previous memory remaining. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
The second aspect of that first guideline is a decline in cognitive abilities such as judgment and thinking. And again, you classified Ieng Thirith as having a significant decline in that particular cognitive ability. Is that right?
Yes, there are. That criteria relates to a number of cognitive abilities in relation to judgment, thinking, and related behaviours.
One of the other guidelines requires that those declines in memory, judgment, and thinking must have been in existence for at least 6 months. And you found, on the basis of all the information you had and your own knowledge, that that criterion was also satisfied. Did you not?
Yes.
The final criterion for dementia, as set out in the international classification, is the absence of clouding of consciousness. Could I ask you firstly, is that related to a person's ability to be aware of the environment that they're in?
I'm going to ask Professor Campbell to comment.
Yes, it is. It's used particularly to help distinguish between delirium, that is a shorter period of confusion related to an intercurrent illness, and in which the level of awareness fluctuates quite considerably. There has been no fluctuation with Ieng Thirith. It has been constant. And so it's not as though a cloud passes away across the sun for a time and she is not seeing so well and then clears again. It has been constant that she has been confused by questions and not remembering properly.
So that she also fulfills the criterion in that she is in a constant state of lacking an awareness, perhaps, of her surroundings.
That is correct, and she's been fully alert with no clouding of consciousness during all of our testing.
Thank you. What I would like to do now is just ask you a little bit about the history. And I'm not going to go into detail because this has been explored. But you were asked by Her Honour Judge Cartwright about the administering of antipsychotic medication. Firstly, she was prescribed quetiapine and also clonazepam. But I pronounced that badly, I apologise. Are they both used as antipsychotic medications?
No, quetiapine is used as an antipsychotic medication, but clonazepam is used as a sedative.
And
it's the same group as Valium, diazepam, for example.
It is used as a sedative. Is it sometimes used where there is considerable anxiety in a patient?
Yes, that is so.
We know from the records of the hospital attended by Ieng Thirith in Bangkok that she was first prescribed with clonazepam back in December 2004, along with other medication. Might that be an indication of a very early stage in the development of some form of dementia?
It is difficult to say because any person can have an episode of delirium related to physical illness. For example, a pneumonia may trigger an episode of delirium in a younger person. But people with early dementia are predisposed to delirium. They are much more likely to get delirium with any physical illness. And so it is certainly possible that this was an early indicator of dementia.
Whilst on the subject of the medication, perhaps I should say that the document I've just referred to is E111/3.3, and the next document I refer to is 00646-360. And what we are able to see from the medical records which have been kept since Ieng Thirith has been in detention is that, in fact, over the period from the 20th of December 2007 through until, and the document I'm looking at goes to the 27th of July 2011, there were, in fact, variations in the amount of quetiapine that was prescribed and also of clonazepam. And the only point I wish to refer to, really for the record, is that in December 2010, 2 milligrams of clonazepam was prescribed and 150 milligrams of quetiapine. In July 2011, at a time when Professor Chak Tida was the doctor in charge, it was still the same quantity of clonazepam, but the quetiapine had been reduced by 50 milligrams to 100. Would it be right to say that it is a result of some symptom or alteration in a symptom that medication is changed in that way?
Two comments. Firstly, when reducing psychotropic drugs, it needs to be done gradually, and that is what I recommended when I first saw Ieng Thirith, a gradual reduction of the medications. The second is that these medications are used occasionally in people with dementia when their behaviour becomes agitated or aggressive. And so, although they are used primarily for a psychotic illness, particularly the quetiapine, they are used for people with dementia, but do have to be used very carefully because of the adverse effects that they can cause.
Thank you. I'd like now just to look at one or 2 points in your report. And it's right, isn't it, that we read this report in conjunction with all of the reports provided by the experts last year, yourselves, and indeed in February of this year. You've already dealt with the number of people to whom you spoke in connection with Ieng Thirith's condition. From what you say, it is particularly important to have the observations of those that are responsible for her care on a daily basis, as well as the doctors who care for her. Would that be right to say?
Yes, I think that is a vital part of the information that one needs to collect. As has been stated before, people with dementia can present a social front, and therefore just a one-off interview without collecting that background information or that corroborative information can be misleading.
You made it quite clear in your report of October of last year that you had consulted with both Dr. Kurt Chunli and Dr. Cham Roon of Calmette Hospital, and they were of the same view that there was a decline of significance in Ieng Thirith's memory. I mention them because, of course, they add to the involvement of Cambodians in this assessment. Would you agree with that?
And yes, I would agree, and also just to reiterate the fact that in 2009, Professor Kai, psychiatrist, a Cambodian psychiatrist, in conjunction with Dr. Brinded, an international expert, came to the view that there was a diagnosis of mild dementia.
Looking at your observations at paragraph 40 of your report, would it be your view that if Ieng Thirith believed someone was sleeping above her, that is an indication of something that is hallucinatory?
I think our view is that it is abnormal. Whether you define it as a misinterpretation of a mosquito net that's wrapped up or a hallucination, I think we would probably want to look at it in more detail and ask some further questions over time. I think the important fact is that it is abnormal and that she either misinterpreted a mosquito net as being a human being or a skull or a child, or she actually hallucinated and saw something that wasn't there. So there's two possibilities. Either possibility is abnormal.
We know from the note provided by Mr. Sridharan in May of this year, which is E138/1/7/12, that when he was conducting the training program, at one stage, Ieng Thirith was very distressed because she believed she had insects crawling all over her. And in your report at paragraph 43, you refer to the report of the guards that she'd spoken of someone physically present in her mosquito net over the past few months. So when one puts together these various observations from different people, does that begin to provide an indication that there is a problem with hallucinating?
Yes, I think we would say broadly there's a problem with perception, and there are very specific definitions around whether you call it an illusion, a misinterpretation, or an hallucination. I think it's fair to say that without us having spoken to Mr. Sridharan about this specific symptom, all we can say is that it's an abnormal perception, and equally the information we got from the guards about a human being being in a mosquito net, again, we would say that that's an abnormal perception.
These kind of abnormal perceptions are seen in patients who suffer from a significant degree of dementia, aren't they? Thank you. You say a correct scoring of Professor Chak's MMSE test would have been 15. That would have brought Ieng Thirith within the significant degree of cognitive impairment, wouldn't it?
Yes, international guidelines suggest a score below 23 is abnormal, and a score between 10 and 20 indicates a moderate degree of cognitive impairment.
And indeed, that would support, would it not, what was said by Professor Chak to you on the same paragraph 40, where she says that Ieng Thirith could not remember the topic of a conversation 1 or 2 minutes after it had started.
Yes, and as we stated before, that would be abnormal for an 80-year-old person with just a normal aging process.
Looking at paragraph 41, the trial of rivastigmine, in fact, extended to about 20 weeks in all, didn't it? Do I understand from your observations on the report that was shown to you by the prosecutor this morning that there has been found to be perhaps reason to sometimes extend the use of these drugs which help people with dementia, but that if there's no improvement noted at all within the first 3 months, then there is not going to be any improvement thereafter.
Well, the evidence on this topic does develop over time. Our understanding of the study that was presented this morning was that the improvement was no more than 2 points on the mini mental state examination if you extended the period of time that not this particular medication was used, but another one, donezepil and memantidine. So our understanding was that this single trial found a 2-point increase, but as we said earlier, this isn't directly applicable to rivastigmine, and we do not believe 2 points will increase the cognitive abilities of Ieng Thirith to a degree that she can sufficiently participate in the trial process.
One of the other people spoken to was Mr. Mean. Did you have an opportunity, apart from speaking to him, to see the note that he made on the 12th of July of this year, in which he said that Ieng Thirith could not walk far, that she needs to be reminded to bathe, dress and eat? It's not a document you've referenced, it's E138/1/8/2.2, but it, again, would you agree, is in line with all the other findings that have been made? And I raise it because it's the same day that the examination was undertaken by Professor Chuck, which produced a score of 24. Would you agree that the note of the nurse is more consistent with someone with a score of 15?
Professor Campbell.
We have not seen the actual note itself. It is consistent with what Mr. Mean told us when we talked with him, and as you indicate, it is much more consistent with a score in the 12 to 15 range than the score of 24.
You've made it quite clear that the deficiencies in the memory are significant, so I'm not going to go through again any of that with you. It's clear the family are not recognised. All the matters you raise are, again, typical of dementia, aren't they?
Yes.
Thank you. Just then, if I can come on to the capacities. Your conclusion at paragraph 62 is that she, Ieng Thirith, would have considerable difficulties in relation to both fitness to plead and fitness to stand trial, as I understand it.
Yes.
And although you note that she has a somewhat basic understanding of crimes against humanity as involving doing wrong, and murder as killing, and genocide as destroying a group or destroying a race, she has no greater subtlety in understanding any of the issues raised by those particular offences. Would that be a fair way to put it?
Yes.
Have you ever had any indication, for example, that Ieng Thirith understands that she is herself in a detention centre awaiting trial on very grave offences?
We had no indication of this in our interviews, 3 interviews this week.
Inconsistencies in her responses about
Professor Campbell, I'm sorry, I did hear what you say. The question of inconsistencies is covered by your report, and what you have all noted is that in questioning Ieng Thirith, she isn't able to give a consistent answer to a question. It's your view, from everything you've said, that she's not purposely trying to fool you and feign, but she just can't really understand what she's being asked. Is that fair? I think the record requires a yes.
Yes.
The position, therefore, is that you have concluded, taking all the strands together and not giving too much weight at all to the MMSE, that she simply lacks the capacities that you're very familiar with to be able to exercise any of her fair trial rights at this stage in her illness.
That's exactly right.
Now, just about the treatment, we're clear from what you've said that there is no known treatment, either by therapy or medication, that is going to change her situation, and that dementia is a progressive disease, so she will get worse. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that because the disease involves the destruction of the cells of the brain?
Yes.
And therefore, any expert in this court, faced with a woman who was found to have moderate to severe dementia, would not be able to say that her condition would in the future improve in any meaningful, significant way. Is that the result of it?
Yes.
Finally, this, from what you've said, she is capable of living within a family environment as long as she is cared for by someone with sufficient knowledge to support her in her daily needs. She does not require the input of the medical profession on a regular daily basis. Is that a fair summary of what you've said?
Yes, and I asked Professor Campbell just to comment on that issue as well.
She will require ongoing support for her physical needs because of her inability to manage that herself. Now, that may be managed by family or by support from outside. If her behaviour is settled within her home, then she could be managed there. If some of her behavioural difficulties persist or worsen, then she may need care. She may not be able to be managed at home. She won't require ongoing medical care on a daily basis, but her medical conditions will need to be kept under regular review.
And just finally, this for clarification, the article produced by the prosecutor from the New England Journal of Medicine on donepezil and memantine refers to the standardized mini-mental state examination. Should we conclude that is in fact the same as the MMSE that we've been referring to in court?
I've never seen it referred to as the SMMSE before, but I think we can assume that it is the MMSE standardized.
Thank you very much.
The President, thank you.
The President, we thank you, Professor and Dr. Sina Fazel, Professor John Campbell, and Professor Lina Wood. We thank you very much. The hearing of the expert reports concerning the results of the reassessment of the fitness to stand trial of Ms. Ieng Thirith has come to an end. You will be now released and you may return home or to any location or direction you wish to go. And we are very much grateful for your time and efforts over the past 2 days. And we thank you especially Dr. Sina Fazel and Professor John Campbell, who have traveled from afar to assist the chamber. And your assistance will significantly contribute to ascertaining the truth in the current case before us. And the chamber also notes that the three experts have been very patient and very cooperative with the chamber. And we strongly believe that your contribution is significant to ascertain the truth concerning the fitness to stand trial of Ms. Ieng Thirith. We wish you a very safe travel back home. Court officer is instructed to facilitate with the Wesu unit to arrange the transport and the facilitation of their release back home. So now the three experts are released.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and Your Honours. I'd just like to say thanks to, on behalf of us all, to the witness support group who have provided us with excellent support and made our visits here very much easier. So thank you for the opportunity to appear before the court and for the support that we have had. Thank you.
The President, indeed, you may now leave the room. The President, Counsel, you're on your feet. You may now proceed.
Mr. President, before we make closing statements, I want to ask you about the presence of Mrs. Ieng Thirith during this part. And the parties may wish her to be here. Obviously, during the technical discussions on her state of health, there was a very good reason for her not to be there. But unless there is a legal reason for her being absent from this stage of the discussion, we, at the very least, would certainly wish to have her present during this final stage.
The President, the Chamber notes that it is not necessary to grant such a request because the hearing on her fitness to stand trial has already been ruled upon. Ieng Thirith has been ordered to remain in her holding cell, and we have already ordered her to be brought to only her holding cell during the course of the proceedings, and she is there. And finally, before we conclude the hearing, we would like to hand over to Judge Silver Cartwright to have a few words concerning the submissions by parties. Judge Cartwright, you may now proceed.
Thank you, President. On behalf of the judges of the trial chamber, we would like counsel in their closing submissions to comment specifically on 3 topics. You are not limited to these, of course, but we wish to hear your submissions on the following 3 topics. First, there is an undisturbed decision that Ieng Thirith is unfit to stand trial. If you have any submissions that suggest that that decision should be reviewed, then please say so. Secondly, if she remains, if the decision remained that she is still unfit to stand trial, do you have any submissions on the issue of her continuing detention? And if you and the third matter that the Chamber would like you to focus on is whether you would be proposing any conditions on her release from detention, and if you sought such conditions, what is your legal basis for making that submission? The time allowed for closing submissions will be brief, and these topics will assist the trial chamber greatly. Thank you very much. President, is there anything you wish to add to that?
The President, no, I'm afraid not now. The Chamber would like to adjourn for 20 minutes, and the next session will be resumed. And when the session resumes, we will hear the closing statement starting from the prosecution, then the lead co-lawyers for the civil parties, and finally the counsels for Mrs. Ieng Thirith.